All right, so the topic for today is training and webinars with Zoho Remotely. So I am Dylan. I'm an evangelist here at Zoho. My job used to involve going around and speaking to the lovely Zoho customers at all kinds of live events, and I got to travel all over the place. And for the foreseeable future, my job is much more focused on webinars. That's okay. I've already done a whole bunch of webinars in the past. I do prefer talking to people in person, but you know, we gotta make do with what we've got. Remotely, which we're going to be talking about today, is a very new offering by Zoho. But actually, each of the applications in Remotely, most of them have been around for years or more. So I'll explain that a bit more in just a second. All right, so the agenda for this session is just a welcome to Zoho Remotely. I'll explain a few things about Zoho, the company, and Zoho Remotely as an offering. Then I'll introduce you all to Zoho ShowTime, which is what I'm using to deliver this session right now. So ShowTime is one of the applications that is included in your Remotely bundle. So I'll teach you how to use it. I'll give you practical tips. So a good portion of this will just kind of be a demo of ShowTime. So I'll show you how do you set up a session, how do you promote it, what are the logistics of actually running the thing, and then all kinds of practical tips learned through painful experience of messing up a bunch of webinars. And then at the very end, we can do a Q&A, and I'll share you some links of where to learn more. So I have one person in the chat who says that they can't hear me anymore. In case anybody else has this problem, go ahead and try refreshing. It should just take you right back into it. And I'll just post that in the chat real quick so they can actually hear what I just said. And just in case for some reason you get completely, having all kinds of AV or internet problems at your house and nothing is working, then I will be sending out a recording at some point of this webinar. So hopefully, if everything kind of isn't working for you today, at least you'll be able to get the recording. Okay, so I'll be checking that chat periodically just to make sure that everybody is still able to follow along. All right, so the goals for this webinar: conquer your fear of presenting, learn to do remote training like a pro, and drastically improve your life in all ways. So this is a picture of my dog, Aunt May. This picture of her is actually where I'm sitting right now. You can see the lovely laundry basket in the background. So most people are working from home these days. I think we're all kind of in that together. And if one suggestion, if you're going to do a bunch of webinars, is try and get a nicer mic. Or what you can do is you can use like the headphones that plug into your computer. Sometimes that will help with the sound quality. Some people, it sounds like, didn't really like my sound quality today, but other people said it's great. So I'm just going to believe the people that said it's great. All right, so a bit about Zoho as a company. So Zoho has actually been around heck long. You probably haven't heard about us before because Zoho doesn't actually spend a lot of money on advertising. And so compared to a lot of tech companies, we do stuff kind of different. So we've actually been around 24 years. It's hard for me to believe because I would have been like a toddler then. We have over 7,000 employees. And I think one of the more interesting things about Zoho is that we are bootstrapped. So that means there's no Zoho stock. We are not a public company, and we never plan to be. So we didn't have private investors. We have just, paved our way all on our own, reinvesting the money that we make back into the products and just kind of slowly growing in the background for years and years and years. And so we have 50 million users right now. So we're not a small company by any means, but people tend to just kind of not talk about us as much as some of the big brand names because one, we don't have stock, and two, we don't spend a lot on marketing. Okay. So moving on, one other thing about Remotely is the privacy. So because Remotely is a free tool, if you are anything like me, you're probably kind of suspicious of what is our privacy policy like. Zoho actually has very good privacy practices. So if you actually take the time to read our privacy policy, which I know you probably did not, it says that you own your own data. Zoho does not own all your data. We will never sell your data, and we will never do advertisements. So you may be wondering, well, if you guys aren't selling all of my data to make a profit, then how are you offering all this stuff for free? So Remotely was really something that we created in response to the coronavirus epidemic, and we realized, hey, a bunch of people need these remote work tools. And Zoho has several different bundles of software already, and we already had all of the tools that were part of Remotely, but we just bundled them up and offered it for free because we realized hecka more people are suddenly trying to use all this stuff. And there's really no strings attached to this. It's free until July 1st, at which point we will decide whether to extend the free period or start charging for Remotely. We have not yet decided on the pricing, but I don't think it'll be too bad because most of our software is very competitively priced. And basically, we're offering it for free because we're just hoping you'll give it a try. And then at the end, if you still like us and your business survives this insane economic collapse, that maybe you'll decide to pay for it. So that's the deal here. Okay, so this slide shows you the basic structure of Zoho. So we have apps at the bottom. We sell over 45 different applications as standalones. We also have these platforms or bundles in the middle. So we have like an HR platform, a finance platform. And so these are usually department-based bundles of related tools that all kind of work together. And then up at the top, we have the one package to rule them all, which we call Zoho One. We refer to this as the operating system for business because it's just giving you pretty much everything you could conceivably want software-wise for your small or medium business, or even your enterprise business. We do have some customers that have like thousands of employees using Zoho One. We also have people that have like 5 employees using Zoho One. So it is extremely versatile. And so Zoho One just packages everything together for one per user price. So you're not paying any more to turn on the extra apps. And the way that the pricing works out with all the other Zoho stuff, in case you're wondering, is just basically, we have these bundles, and when you get the bundle, it's going to save you a bunch of money because instead of buying all those apps individually, you're getting a discounted price. So this arrow shows you that you are here. Zoho Remotely is like one of these bundles that just kind of sits in the middle. So I had one person who asked, will this be included with Zoho One? So that's a good question. Zoho One just includes every Zoho application that we make. So right now, because Remotely is so new, I don't know if there's like a good migration tool from Remotely to Zoho One. I'm sure they will have that in the future if they don't already have it. But all of the stuff that's included in Remotely is also included in Zoho One, plus a whole bunch of other stuff like our CRM and all of our finance tools, our HR tools, all kinds of other stuff. But that's not the topic for today. The topic for today is Zoho Remotely. Okay, so Remotely has 11 different applications that are included with it. I am not going to go over all of these applications today because that would take hecka long. There is a getting started webinar later in the day where basically you can go into that and you can say what you're interested in learning more about, and Victoria will try and cover whatever people have the most questions about. But the main subject for today is just going to be 2 of these apps, and really mostly just one of the apps. So they're the ones that you can use for building slide decks and the one that you use for delivering online training. So ShowTime, that's what you're in right now. That's what I'm using to deliver this. It allows you to do remote and in-person training. I'm really going to focus on the remote training part of this because nobody's ever going to do in-person training again as long as we live. Okay, and then Zoho Show lets you build the slide decks. So the slide deck that I've been showing you so far, I put together completely in Zoho Show. it is a competitor to, PowerPoint, the elephant in the room. And I'm not really going to explain much of Show because I think it's fairly straightforward, and most of us are here to learn about doing remote broadcasting, remote training anyways. But the next slide will be the one slide that talks about Zoho Show. So what are the best features of Zoho Show? I can show you right here. Bam. We give you all these incredible Office cartoon people, which you can drop into your presentation. You can drop in speech bubbles. You can have animations. So that's the best thing in Zoho Show. There's really not a lot else to really know about it. I mean, it's just a tool that lets you build slide decks. Okay. I've noticed one or two people have asked questions in the chat area just for my sanity. To help me out, if you have a question during this, please put it in the questions tab on the left side. So you should see both a questions and a chat area. The chat is just going to go out to everyone. The questions will help me keep track of like your questions about the software. And I will be periodically checking those. So one question that came up earlier, and I'm not going to be answering everybody's questions throughout the whole thing, but it's, will this work with Zapier? So various different Zoho applications are set up to work with Zapier. Since there are 45 of them, I cannot remember off the top of my head which ones do and which ones don't. Also, for those of you who are interested in Zoho One, which is the bundle of all of Zoho's software, we have something which is a lot like Zapier built into Zoho One. And it's called Zoho Flow. And it's the same concept. It lets you build these like automated integrations between different applications. And pretty much all of our apps are connected into Zoho Flow. Less of them to Zapier, but still quite a few are connected to Zapier. All right. So some of these other questions I'm going to try and save for the end just for the sake of maintaining the flow of my presentation here. Feel free to keep asking them. I just, probably won't be responding immediately. Okay, so who is ShowTime for? I think sales and marketing teams are the ones that can get the most use out of this tool. So sales and marketing teams, obviously you can use this to do like customer training, customer education. That's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to promote a product. You can also use it internally though. So HR departments can set up online training using Zoho ShowTime. And basically you can run this two different ways. One way is where you can have registration. So if you made it here to this webinar, you've already seen what that process is kind of like. But you can also do a ShowTime presentation by invite only. So if you just want to invite a team in your company and present to them, you can do that. Training agencies or independent trainers are also common customers of Zoho ShowTime. So we have a feature, which I'll briefly talk about later, which allows you to do paid trainings. So you can connect a payment gateway and sell tickets for your training. That's kind of cool. Schools can also make use of this if anyone's here for like a school or a nonprofit or something. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is that ShowTime is not a full LMS or learning management system. So that means that we don't really have the structure in place with ShowTime to set up like a course where you have a set of chapters or lessons that people go through chronologically, and then you have resources, and then you give them a quiz, and then you give them grades. So it's not really set up for all of that. But as you guys saw earlier, we can do like a one-time session. We can do polls. We can keep track of how people responded to those polls, that kind of thing. So if you want to do it to just live share a lecture and then add in some resources, like in the handout section, then you can use it for a school situation. All right, so the next section of this presentation is just going to be, what do you do before getting started with your presentation? All right, so what I'm actually going to do at this point is I am going to switch over to screen share mode, and I'm just going to live demo the application. And so for the next big part of this presentation, I'm going to be switching back and forth between my slide deck and between a screen share. So I'll do that right now. All right, so you should all be able to see my screen with my mouse moving around, and this is what ShowTime looks like when you're logged in as a trainer. And so there's just a list of all of your sessions. We put the date of each session nice and big over here. And then you can filter this so you can see just the sessions that you have to do. In case you're working at a company where there's tons of people doing sessions, it can get kind of messy, so that's useful. You can see everyone's sessions, or I could switch it to org sessions, and basically if there was another person on this account, and I could just see all of everyone else's sessions, not mine. So this is just sorted chronologically. I can also see past sessions here, so the ones that have happened. There's a view analytics button for those. I can also then go to the on-demand section. So if I create an on-demand session, that will show up there. And just checking real quick. Okay, it seems like you're all still with me. So far, so good. And then a couple other things about the interface. So there's, besides the session view, there's library over on the left. So this is where you can put in like your presentation materials. The recordings of your sessions will get stored here. And also you can create a library of poll questions. So if you want to have poll questions that are common across a bunch of webinars, then you put them in the library, and anybody who does a webinar in your account can access that poll question. So that's useful when you have like standard types of things that you want to ask. And then there's settings and administration, so we'll kind of get into that in a minute. Okay, so to create a session, I just go to the Sessions tab, hit Create Session, and then it gives me three options here. I can do a remote session, which is for a live broadcast. That's what I'm doing right now. That's what you're participating in. I can do a face-to-face session or a classroom setup. So again, we'll probably never see each other in person as long as we live, but back in the day, this was a pretty useful feature of ShowTime, because what you could do is you could set this up, and it was better than just hitting play on a PowerPoint, because people in the audience could then just follow a link, and they could open up your presentation, your slide deck, and see it on their phone or on their iPad or on their computer. And if it's a huge auditorium, then that's awesome, because that means somebody who has bad vision, who's sitting in the back of the room and their glasses are all smudged, well, now they have it right in front of them and they can see what you're presenting really clearly. Also, people can submit questions from the back of the room, or people who are shy and they don't want to say the question out loud in a big auditorium, they can just submit it through text, and then you can choose when you want to project that up on the screen. So that's what that used to be used for. And then there's on-demand. So on-demand just means you have a recorded video of the session, but there's also a registration page. So people have to give you their name and their email or whatever you want to collect. So that's just a way of setting up some gated content and collecting some marketing leads in order to share a webinar or something like that. So I'm going to focus on doing these live sessions. So I'll give the session a name, like how to maximize your skills. The description, so this will go on the registration page itself. It's a good session, learn a lot. And then I can say how often I want my session to occur. So by default, it's going to be once. I can set it up on a weekly schedule, though, monthly schedule. And then basically if I do like a weekly schedule, I just choose a start and an end date. And for some reason, it's just formatted, if you're in the US, the way that we never want to look at dates, which is where it puts the day and then the month. But if you're in like any other country, then that probably makes sense to you. Okay, so one thing that you'll want to definitely watch out for is when you set up your session, make sure you have the correct time zone chosen that you are actually going to be presenting in. So the registration page will automatically detect like the viewer's time zone and translate stuff for them. But you just want to make sure this is set to your actual time zone. It probably will be, but you never know. Okay, and then there's one other choice here, which is individual registration for each occurrence or single registration for all occurrences. So I'm going to do individual registration. So basically what that means is that when somebody goes to sign up, they choose which date and time to attend. So if you're doing the same session every week for 4 weeks, then somebody chooses which week they're going to go to. If you want to have somebody sign up and then attend like all 4 sessions, then you would choose the single registration option here. And they just sign up once and then they'll be able to attend all of the session dates. But for most cases, it's probably going to be individual registration. All right, so I hit create. It puts up all my session dates here because I chose the weekly option. And I'm just going to do one more check to make sure everyone's with me. It looks like we are all with me. Okay, great. Also going to drink some water. Okay, so after we've set up the session, it will also create a session join link. So I'll just show you what we've got so far. Wow, there's our session join link. So our description shows up here, your trainer and your show up here. I'll talk about how you customize this later. You probably already have seen something like this. And because I chose that individual registration option, there's like this little drop down where somebody can pick which date they want to register for. It gives me a countdown. So one thing that's important to note is that most of this you can't really customize that much. Obviously, you can put in your own title, description, profile, etc. But look-wise, pretty much the only thing you can change about this is whether it's a light theme or a dark theme, and then you can have your company logo plopped in at the top there. But otherwise, the customization options are kind of limited at the time for ShowTime pages. Okay, great. So that is basically how you set up a session. One cool thing is I can come in here. If I decide I need to like get rid of one of these session dates, I could just delete it, or I could edit the start time for just one of the dates. So if I'm mostly on a weekly schedule, but like 1 week I have to change stuff, that's very easy to set up. Another thing is trainers. So you can add in co-trainers. You can have multiple trainers set up on one webinar, and that can be useful for several reasons. One way that you can use it, which kind of wish I had right now because you guys have already had a lot of questions, is you can have a co-trainer just sitting there who's answering all the questions while the main presenter talks. Or I could start presenting and then trade off to my co-trainer at a certain point and have them do a different part of the webinar and basically just choose to give them access. All right, so scrolling down a bit more, so we have session material, polls, handouts. So for session material, I can upload a file from my computer. I could pick one from my ShowTime library, or I can pick from WorkDrive. So WorkDrive is that cloud storage application which comes included with Remotely. So I could just click on that, and then it'll open up this little like mini window with WorkDrive, and then any presentations which I have built using Zoho Show will just automatically be there in my WorkDrive. If I had a bunch of folders, they'd show up on the left, and then I could choose whichever one I want to choose and apply, and then that will be the slide deck that shows up that I'm able to scroll through when I do my presentation. So polls, I could create new polls, 3 simple options. I can do a star rating, like a text entry, or a multiple choice option, pretty straightforward. And then handouts, you can upload videos, PDFs, you can also do links. So a handout is just an extra resource that will be immediately available if you want it to when people sign up for the webinar, or you can make it something that's only available at the end of the webinar. So if you have like an infographic, you have an ebook you want to promote along with your presentation, those are the kinds of things that you could use in a handout. Or even if you just have like a link that you know you're going to be talking about and you just want to give it to everyone right away, you can add that into the handout section. So that is the basic setup for getting a session ready. So now let me switch back over to my slide deck for a moment. Okay, you should all now see my slide again, which says registration type. So this is just explaining, the difference between individual registration. There's individual registration. You get one choice for each time. Or single registration, it's just going to put all of the dates up there. You register once for all of them, and somebody can actually click the button to see what the different dates are. So this slide deck, in case you're wondering, will be emailed out after this webinar is over. So another thing I kind of already explained, but session material is just what gets presented, and then the handouts are just extra resources that you just give people and they can access. So as an attendee, you should see a little handout thing. I think I put like a link in there or something. Okay, so smart promotions. You can actually track the source of where your webinar registrations are coming from. And the way that you're going to want to do that is using the Promote tab when you're setting up your webinar. So let me actually switch back into the screen share and I'll just show you real quickly what that is like. All right, so if I go over to the Promote tab on my webinar, it gives me an embed form, so I can copy the code for this embed form and then just paste that into my website builder. If I don't want to do the full registration page and just have this like on a page that I can design more myself, so that's handy. But also there's this thing to share session link. So I can come in here and I can say Facebook or something, and it'll create this little code that goes at the end of the link to the registration page. This is called a like a HTML parameter. There's a bunch of different names for this depending on who you ask, but basically, if you know a lot about marketing, you probably know about these. It's just a way of tracking where did somebody come from when they landed on this page. So you can create a bunch of these and then basically figure out, oh, hey, we promoted this in an email campaign, and we promoted it on Instagram and on Twitter and on my dumb blog or whatever. And you can keep track of where all these different people who attended the webinar actually came from, so which promotion actually worked the best. And then once people have actually done the sign up, they'll be listed right here, and you'll be able to see, I'll show this in my slide deck, but you'll be able to see the source of each person. You can even export the list of all the people who registered in a Excel spreadsheet if you want. But of course you could use Zoho Sheet because that's another thing that we make, cloud spreadsheet. And you can do whatever you want to do with that. Import it into your email campaign software, whatever it is you want to do. Okay, so we'll go back to the slide deck. All right, so this slide shows you the source column. So once people have registered, you'll be able to see whatever information you collected about them and the source if you've done those promo links. So one tip to maximize the attendance on your webinars is to send out email reminders. So we have this built into ShowTime. I've included the basic steps for how you get there. You don't really have to pay attention to that right now because again, the link to the slides will be sent out to you. So when you go into those webinar settings, you just click on your webinar, it will take you to that screen that I've been on, go over to settings, then you go to email reminders. You can set up a reminder to go out a day before, an hour before, and 10 minutes before your session. You can also set up a thank you email to go out. So one thing that's a little weird about ShowTime right now is that you can't really edit the ones that go out before the webinar begins. You can edit the thank you email though. I don't know why that is. Please don't ask. So if that doesn't work for you, that's totally okay because you can just go into the people tab, export your spreadsheet of all the people who have registered for your webinar, and then go into your MailChimp or your Zoho campaigns. And you can then send out your email campaign and just customize it however you want to customize it. But it is nice to know that we have that built in. We make it super easy for you. And then we'll even give you reports of like how many of those got opened and delivered and stuff. Okay, another thing that you can do is you can set up evaluation surveys. So you can set up a survey that will just immediately start once the webinar ends. You can also attach that into the thank you email by just clicking a checkbox. So you'll see this when this webinar ends, but it's kind of similar to a poll. You can have like a star rating, you can ask for feedback, whatever it is you want to ask. So I strongly recommend doing that for those of you who are new to this. Also, I really recommend setting up those reminder emails because you think when people like commit to a date, they're going to show up. But when people commit to something and then it's like free and there's no reason for them to really go and they're just going because their boss is making them, they'll probably forget. So you want to try and maximize attendance by setting those reminder emails. It really does make a big difference. Okay, another thing you can do to promote your webinars is you can offer certificates. So in Zoho ShowTime, we give you all kinds of different certificate templates. Again, you don't really have to pay too close attention to the steps right there. That's really just more for later on when you get the slides. But you can go in, you can set up in those settings for your webinar a certificate that says like, hey, thanks for doing the thing. And then, this is just a way that people can verify to their boss, I guess, that they actually did the webinar that they're supposed to attend. You can also say, in your promotions, like, get our PDF certificate and share it on LinkedIn, and a bunch of people will pretend to care. So that's one option. Okay, so paid training, I mentioned this earlier. If you are a training agency or an independent trainer, you can actually set up tickets on your ShowTime account. And so if you want to do this, you have to connect a payment gateway. This slide shows you all of the possible payment gateways that you can connect into ShowTime right now. So you set up an account with one of these payment processors, and you just basically sign in to connect it with your ShowTime account and hit approve to say, yeah, you can process whatever ticket information. And it's fairly straightforward. You can just put in like a price for the tickets, and then you can also set whether people can get refunds and how many days before they can get refunds. And that's pretty much the only two things you can set. So another thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is you'll want to have Firefox or Chrome installed on your computer if you are going to be the presenter. Your attendees will need to have Firefox and Chrome if they want to be able to view this from the web. So I know there's probably at least a few of us here who probably used this without Firefox or Chrome, and you're wondering, how the heck did this all work? Well, if you don't have one of those two supported browsers, then you'll see a message like this when you go to register for a webinar. And so it'll tell you if you're using Edge or Safari or one of those other ones, your browser is not supported, and then it'll give you a big green download button. That's okay. You can just download a viewer for your computer on Windows or PC, and then you'll still be able to attend the webinar. All right, so for the next phase of this, I'm going to be talking about the logistics of actually running the training, what happens during all of this. And wow, we got a bunch of questions. All right, so I'll answer maybe a couple of these right now just to tide you over, but I'll mostly be taking the questions at the end. Can you convert or save a PowerPoint into a show presentation? So that's a good question. So yeah, when you upload a PowerPoint presentation into WorkDrive, which is like our version of Google Drive basically, except it doesn't look at all of your data. Anyways, when you do that, you can convert it into a show presentation. Works pretty well. That's all cool. Can you import a PowerPoint presentation into Show? Yes, I believe you can. Is there a fee that Zoho charges when you're using paid tickets with auth.net? So we actually don't add any extra fees onto whatever the payment gateways are. So whatever deal you have with your payment gateway, that's what they're going to charge you for those transaction fees. Zoho is not going to try and take a cut. Do co-trainers need to have a Zoho license? Yes, so they will have to be a member of your ShowTime account in order to be made a co-trainer. But if you're coming to this and you're on remotely, all your licenses are free right now, so at least that's good. How do we direct people to the registration page besides email? This is really like an existential question, I feel like. So I don't know. I mean, it's really up to you. You can promote it on social media. You can put a link from your website. You can put flyers around town with like a QR code. There's all kinds of ways that you could promote your registration page. So I know that's not everybody's questions, but I'll try and get to more later on. All right, so continuing on, what the heck is this thing actually like when you're using it? What am I seeing right now as I'm presenting? So first, just some tips as somebody who's done a bunch of webinars. So before you start your session, just join it a few minutes earlier than the actual start time. Just be ready to go. Don't be like brushing your teeth a second before it's supposed to start. Mute the notifications on your phone and computer. So especially if you're doing a screen share with ShowTime, you'll want to make sure those things are muted. Also, a pro tip is put a slide at the very beginning of your slide deck that just says getting started soon, because then you can just leave that sitting there with your mic muted in the few minutes before. And so those early birds that show up will at least be reassured that things are working and they're not just like staring at a black screen that's never going to actually start. And then if you do have children in your house, you're going to want to have a soundproof layer. You can also use duct tape, but sometimes they get out of that. So children just make a lot of noise. You're going to want to silence them. All right, so what do I actually see as a presenter? Good question. All right, I'm going to show you on the next slide. You ready? Bam, this is the first thing that you see when you set it up. So as a presenter, your screen looks quite a bit similar to what you're seeing as an attendee. So congratulations, you already know quite a bit about how this works. The first time that you go to do this, your browser is going to ask to use your microphone. Make sure you hit allow, because otherwise it's just not going to work. And this is kind of a bad thing about ShowTime, I guess, am I going to be totally frank? First, it'll show you the screen of like, hey, do you want to share your audio and your video? And then you pick which camera you want to use and you pick which mic you want to use. So that's all awesome. What's weird though is the moment that you turn on that mic or that camera, it's going to start broadcasting it to anyone who's there. So if you show up like 3 minutes early and there's already someone waiting there and you turn that on, they're going to see you, and they're going to see you even before you hit the start broadcast button. So I am asking the ShowTime team to reconsider this choice, but it'll take a while for software updates to happen. But for the time being, you'll want to get in early. You'll want to shut off the audio and the video until you're ready to go, and then just put up a slide that says, we'll get started soon. But that's just to make sure that everything is working on this first screen. Okay, another pro tip is practice. Make sure every single person who's going to be doing a webinar practices before they do it. But also, when they do practice, make sure it's using the same device that they'll actually be using on game day. So I have been to many, many Zoholics, which are our like live events throughout the year where we present to customers. And inevitably, there's always like one guy who's like, oh, I practiced my presentation, everything was fine. But he didn't practice it with the laptop that's sitting up on the podium in front of everyone. And so he didn't realize that that laptop was configured differently, or it hadn't had some update or whatever. And so something just didn't go right. So try and make your practice as close to the real thing as possible. That's my pro tip. Another pro tip, check in with the audience. So if you showed up at the beginning, you heard me do this already, but always begin your webinar by making sure that the audience can both hear you and see what's on your screen. One kind of funny story about this is one of our presenters once asked like if everyone could hear her, and people said yes. And so then she just did the entire rest of the webinar without looking at any of the questions or anything. And then only when she got to the end did she see the hundreds of comments where people were in all caps like, I can't see your screen, I can just hear your voice. And they were just desperately trying to get through to her. And we even realized this, and we tried to get through to her, and we were like texting her, but she had done my first tip and muted her phone, so no interruptions. So anyways, you'll want to make sure that everyone can hear you. If they can't, or if they're having AV problems, tell them to refresh. Also, you can send them a recording later. All right, so Aunt May is back. If you are using the webcam, it'll show up in the bottom right corner. I've just photoshopped Aunt May into all these pictures. You can pretend that she's the one talking to you. So that's how you'll see yourself if you're the presenter. And this is the main presenter screen. So your slide deck is going to show up kind of big here. And I'll just kind of walk through some of the main things that you'll want to know about when you're actually doing a presentation. And again, this is not a replacement for actually doing a test yourself with one of your colleagues or friends. All right, so the thing you're going to want to pay attention to most is these things at the bottom. So you'll see it says on air. Definitely going to want to make sure that says on air. It also says mic on, cam off. Pay very close attention to those. If you're talking and your mic is not on, you're going to have a lot of all caps angry comments and a lot of 1-star reviews. So that's the first thing. Another thing is the session materials. So when you set up those session materials at the beginning, like if it's a PowerPoint or a Zoho Show slide deck, or a PowerPoint that's been converted into a Zoho Show slide deck, then they'll show up down here. Most of the time, you don't ever actually have to really touch this, but sometimes you can put in more than one material and you can switch between them. So that's just something kind of important to know if you're doing like, I don't know, multiple decks or something. All right, so next thing is the People tab. So over on the left, there's a People tab. As attendees file in, you'll get notifications so you can see like if new people are coming in just at a glance, and it'll just be a little red icon with a number on it. And one thing that's interesting to note is that you can actually grant mic access to the attendees. So I have a raffle that I usually do where I let one person have mic access, but I'm not going to do that one today. You can also chat an attendee individually by just clicking their name. You go to their name, you click these 3 dots, that's how you grant mic access, you can chat them. Also, if somebody's being a butthead, you can remove them. I've never had to do that so far. All right, so the next tab down is the questions tab. So that's the little red badge I was talking about. When somebody submits a question or someone enters the room, you'll get these notifications in the relevant areas on your screen. When you open up the question tab, you see something kind of like this. And if you've set your questions to be private, then you can choose to project them if you want. So you just hit the project button and then something like this will show up, and it'll just put their name up there with the question, and all the other attendees can, give them a thumbs down if it's a sucky question or something. Yeah, so another tip seems pretty obvious, but hey, might as well say it. Check the questions every so often. Don't wait until the presentation is completely over. Another tip, use polls to engage your audience and gauge your audience. So by gauge your audience, I just mean figure out, are you talking to the people that you're supposed to be talking to? Because Lord knows, I've given many webinars where it says very clearly what the topic is, and then someone shows up and they're like, why aren't you talking about this thing that I thought it was going to be about? And I just have to deal with it. But anyways, use the polls to try and get a sense of who is actually in the room, and also just to keep everyone a little engaged. So that's a good time to do another poll in case you came in late and you didn't see the first polls. So what's your favorite number of stars? This is really low pressure, guys. Okay, one person has answered. Wow. One person bold enough to say that 1 star is their favorite number of stars. Great. So I'm just going to edit that question later, and I'm going to make it say, how good was this webinar? And then I'll show it to my boss. So trick you guys. All right. After the training, so this is the last phase. What happens after this is all done? First thing, if you've set up those evaluation questions, then that will show up right when you hit end on the webinar. So your attendees will immediately see the questions that you've put there. Then you can go check out the analytics for your sessions. You just go back into your past sessions in ShowTime. The analytics, in my opinion, are much easier to find and read than the analytics in some other name brand webinar software, which shall not be named. Some of the analytics that we include: how many registrations and attendees did you get? So that ratio of attendee to registration is always a good way to evaluate whether your marketers are working hard. Session length, how long did it go on for? We also record every single chat and question that gets submitted and keep those till the end of time. Poll responses, so we track that aggregate and individual, so you can see like the average star rating, for instance, and you can also see how each individual answered. So for those of you who give me low ratings, I will be tracking you down. If that will be tied to people's email addresses, if that's one of the things you're collecting, by the way. So if you like have a poll that just says, do you have any questions? And then you give them a text box to write it in, you can then follow up after the fact. So that's something handy. Evaluation responses, very similar to the polls. We can see it aggregate and individual. So pro tip, at the end of your webinar, you're going to want to give post-event resources. So I recommend always editing that thank you email and including like a link to your slides or a link to something that you talked about, because inevitably that's what people always ask for at the end of a webinar. Also, just if you're doing this for like a sales or marketing thing, sharing next steps, give them a next step, a call to action at the end. That's usually pretty handy. All right, we got a couple more questions. Let's see. All right, I'll get to those soon. Don't worry. So one more thing before I get to the very end here, and then we do the final Q&A. I just want to share a few more details about just how you configure everything in ShowTime. So I'm going to go back to screen share, and I'll switch over. Okay, cool. So we talked about the sessions. We talked about the library. So settings. When you click on settings, this is really individual settings. So each trainer in your account, when they go to this, they're going to see their own info. So they can change their photo, they can put in their name, some information about themselves. I put in all real information, even though this is just a demo account. You can put in your job title to be listed on like the registration page. Also links to social media if you want. You can also tag skills that will just be listed. So if you have a bunch of trainers, that's just another way to kind of explain why they're an authority on whatever subject they're talking about. Okay, and then the last tab is administration. So in administration, you can see just kind of an overview of your plan, how much of your storage space have you used, how many trainers have you used out of all your licenses, blah, 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 blah. So this account is a little weird. It shows the trainers in a different place. So we'll get to, or it shows the users in a different place. I'll get to that in a moment. Payments, if you added in a payment gateway, that's where you would go in to set that up or reconfigure it. Organization profile. So this is kind of a weird little feature, but you can also have a profile for your entire organization. And then if you go in the little three dots, and you go to organization profile, it'll open that up. And this will just be like a place to collect all of the sessions that your org has done on one screen. And so you could also promote this screen instead of just promoting each webinar individually. And then you'll have a place where you can drive people and they can choose which webinar to sign up through. Or you can just kind of build that custom yourself. Okay, dashboard. So this is just kind of like an overview of all the stuff that's been happening in your account. What is your audience engagement? Dang, over 100% in this account. Branding, so you can add in a custom domain. Basically, this means like when people go to that registration page, it'll show up as like part of your website. So you can make it like, present or webinars.mywebsite.com if you want to customize that, and it'll walk you through the steps of setting that up with your domain provider. So that's just a way to kind of brand things a bit better, make it feel like it's actually part of your website, not some weird spam thing people are going to. Integrations, if you are familiar with Zoho CRM, we have a lovely integration that passes all of the registrants into the CRM as leads, and then you can also set it up to pass the attendees as contacts to the CRM. So that is also very convenient, and you pretty much just click a button and it turns it on. It's very easy. So that's the admin stuff. Uh, so this is the Remotely home screen, by the way, in case you haven't actually tried Remotely yet. When somebody signs into Remotely, it's going to show them whatever apps have been turned on for them. So here you see ShowTime listed right there, see Show listed over here. If you want to add people as trainers to your ShowTime, you have to be an admin, but you'll go into the admin panel in that upper right corner. And then you'll go into, you can go to users and just like add someone if you want, and then configure them. Like I can click on this guy and I can see he's already a ShowTime member, and then I can edit and make him like a trainer or an admin. By the way, member, if you're a Remotely user, you don't really need to worry about ever making someone a member. It's just basically like giving someone a free license where they can only do a webinar with up to 5 people in it, which most people wouldn't want to limit them to. So you might as well just make everyone a trainer unless they need to be an admin. Admins are the ones who can customize that information about your whole organization. So you can also go into applications, click on ShowTime, and that will show you all the people who can use it. And then you can hit assign users, and then you can add someone from there and set what their role is. So admin or trainer, probably what you're going to want. So that's how you set this up from Zoho Remotely, in case you're not really familiar with how all that works in the administrative side of Remotely. Okay, so back to the slide deck. Just got a couple more things for you guys. More resources. So I said in my pro tip, and I'm going to try and follow through on all my tips. So if you want to learn more, these links, you can screenshot them if you want. They'll also be in the slide deck. Places you can learn more about ShowTime, basically. We have a bunch of like short form videos about ShowTime. So if you just want to remember, how do I do that one little thing? That's a good place to go. We have webinars also just about ShowTime that other people have done. You can check those out. And then there's just like a main ShowTime help area that you can go to. So another thing that I want to talk about before I move into the final Q&A is the ESAP program. So we just launched this program because of the coronavirus epidemic, and basically it's just a way of giving small businesses relief. So what we're doing is we're offering Zoho wallet credits up to $2,000 per business, and so that's just credit that you can apply towards your Zoho subscription costs if you are a paid Zoho user. And in case anyone here is in this boat, in order to apply for the ESAP, you have to have been a paid customer for a year or more, and you have to be a small business, which we define as 25 employees or less. So go to zoho.com/ESAP if that applies to you. You can learn more about how you apply and who it applies to. But you know, that's just something we're doing to try and help people out, because we realize a lot of our customers are going to be struggling right now because of the economic situation. All right, so with that, thank you all for listening to my whole spiel. I've come in at pretty much just under an hour, which is perfect. So now let's get to those last questions. And some clarification on the question earlier, can only registered emails attend the training? Yeah, so when you set up the on-demand webinar, it forces you to turn on the registration for it. Actually, this is one thing I can share a bit more information about here. So I'll switch back to the screen share mode. Okay, yeah, so in the registration, I probably should have talked about this. You can customize which information you collect from your registrants. So you can choose from like predefined ones. So if you want to collect somebody's address or their job title, right? So we have a bunch of other ones. You can also do a custom field. So you could have one that's just like, what is your favorite color, right? You can choose what's mandatory and what's not mandatory. However, the like name, first name, last name, email, those are all going to be set up mandatory by default. Also, one important thing to know about this is you can set up a privacy field where you have somebody consent to your privacy terms and conditions, and then you just basically paste in a link here to wherever your privacy page is, and then people will be opted into those terms and conditions of like how much you can contact them, et cetera, et cetera. Also, a couple other things you can configure when you set it up. You can allow people to join automatically to a session, or you can manually allow or deny access if you want to do that. You can also choose where to redirect people once they have registered, so you can have them land on like a specific web page that thanks them or something, or just stay on the existing page. Also, if you want to do the full private training, you just check allow only invited people to register for the session, and then that means that it's invite only, no one else can get in. So you'll want to make sure you turn that on if you're trying to do the whole private training thing. And then also, this is a feature which can be handy. So you can control how many upcoming sessions you want to show on your registration page. So if you find yourself where you have like a weekly webinar that is planned, but maybe your schedule is constantly shifting, you're having to move things to different days of the week or different hours, then you can set it up so it's only ever going to show like one thing in the future. That way you don't get a bunch of people who are signing up for webinars that are a few weeks out only to then, have to be told that you've changed the time 3 different times and, it's not going to work. So I probably should have showed all of you that feature earlier. Sorry. Also, one other thing in the settings that's important to note. So you can choose whether to enable the chat room or not. So you can set that up to just not have a chat room. If you want to maintain everyone's privacy, you can turn that off, and then also make it so that the questions raised are only visible to the trainers if you want to maintain pure, perfect privacy where no one even knows who else is there. Also, this is the place that you go to do the things like turning on that survey, setting up the email reminders, which I mentioned earlier, setting up the evaluation questions, and then also the theme of your registration page. There's just a light and a dark option for now. But thank you all for coming. I really appreciate how engaged you all were, and I appreciate all of the questions, and good luck starting your adventure doing webinars.